State Senator Andreas Borgeas, representing Fresno County in the area of the Creek Fire, surveying it several days before Newsom and Harris did. So, Senator, welcome back to Sunday Morning Matters. How are you?
Alexan, it's great to be back on the show.
Well, you know, you and I met up there in Shaver Lake last Friday with CAL FIRE Chief Mark Johnson, and the debate over climate change and forest management obviously taking center stage. What do you think is fueling the 3 million acres of wildfires? Do you agree with Newsom that it is partly climate change?
Well, with all due respect to Governor Newsom, he and I are certainly going to part ways on this. As an educator, I believe in science. I believe in the scientific method. But under these circumstances, I think the governor is confusing proximate cause and consequence. And what we're arguing here, based on science and data and consultation with experts that are appropriately schooled and disciplined in forest studies, indicates that while man-made causes of fire account for most of the fires that we're experiencing, it's not climate change that created the exacerbating conditions under which we find ourselves. For example, the cause may have been man-made, or it could have been natural, for example. But because of decades of regulatory and environmental lobbying in Sacramento, it has kept folks from creating emergency access areas in the impacted fire zone. It has made it difficult to institute and implement hardening measures, as well as thinning with prescribed burning and the cleanup of the ground floor over decades. So what you've had are these exacerbated conditions. And for the governor to come out and say it's climate change, well, it's hard to imagine that that is not just part of an easily understandable political narrative that fits a desired outcome.
Well,
I have to fundamentally disagree.
Yeah, so let me say this. Obviously, you saw Governor Newsom there by Pine Ridge Elementary with the vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris. What did you make of their visit? And obviously, they also talked to Chief Mark Johnson, as you did. What do you think he's telling them? And because of what he told you, do firefighters really believe that this is all being a product of climate change?
Well, I think climate change is certainly a proximate factor. Our environment has changed in certain noticeable ways over extended periods of time, but that's not what the issue is. The issue is regulatory and environmental lobbying that have kept firefighters and policymakers from making the needed changes and adaptations necessary for a more natural and sustainable environment, so that when a fire does occur, it is extraordinary. It turns into a tragedy, which is what we've seen with the Creek Fire and other fires around the state. So to call it climate change only, I think, is a deliberate misrepresentation.
What did you make of both visits, though? What was more impactful, the presidential roundtable with President Trump in Sacramento at McClellan Park, or was it the actual visit by Newsom and Harris here in the Central Valley at the Creek Fire and visiting with first responders and the Red Cross and such? What do you make of both visits? Did you see it as politicking in a way, or was this something that is actually going to force the hand and to make change in our forests, especially because it's federal land, so the federal government, are they to blame?
Well, I think from my standpoint, representing 11 counties in Senate District 8, the Creek Fire within 3 of those counties, the takeaway that I appreciated was the amount of vertical integration. So when you have the governor of California and you have the president of the United States paying attention and wanting to be helpful and remedy this issue, that's always a good thing. When you bring people together, that's always a good thing. But from my standpoint, one of the most impactful moments is when I was with Fire Chief Johnson over in the impacted areas, and on my cell phone I had the White House. And the question to the White House through me was, how can the federal authorities be even more effective and helpful? And I wasn't answering it. I passed the phone directly to the CAL FIRE chief. Now, I thought that was terribly impactful. That shows the local, county, state, and federal integration on these issues. And that, I think, was really the strongest takeaway, that we could have a direct line into the White House and have it go directly to the CAL FIRE chief.
I want to finish with this because obviously President Trump there, he had an exchange with the Secretary of Natural Resources, Wade Crowfoot, and the argument that Crowfoot was making of climate change to the president. And the president responded, quote, "It'll get cooler, just watch." That doesn't seem very presidential or seem like a fix, if you will, during a roundtable. What'd you make of that?
I suspect a comment like that was a political discard, but the ultimate controversy here, and I don't think it needs to be a controversy, is that climate change is a proximate factor, but that is not what is creating these exacerbating conditions, and identified 5 things that could be helpful, including the thinning of the forest and the cultivation of the ground floor. Those things, regardless of climate change, would have made a dramatic impact on the mitigation of this wildfire. And let's keep in mind, Alexan, that as people talk about climate change, California alone cannot adjust the climate. America alone cannot adjust the climate. This would take a global response to adjust the climate. So for California alone as a state to make all these grand overtures and all these policy recommendations that we bear the brunt of, ultimately, I think, is not going to allow for the desired results that people want, or at least claim that need to be taken into effect.
All right, State Senator Andreas Borgeas, hey, we appreciate your time, and we'll be moving forward. Hopefully some change will be coming with you up there in Sacramento and obviously on the federal side as well. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, and I'm hoping that we have an emergency session in Sacramento in November to address specifically wildfire-related issues.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alexan. Take care.